everyone? My name is Juwan McKinney, or you can just call me Juice because that is my nickname. Welcome everyone to the Juice Alert episode number 43 today. If you have not subscribed to the Juice Alert already, be sure to do that right about now. You will not regret it. You can find me on YouTube as well as podcasting platforms. That includes Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, all that great stuff. Also, if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to smash that like button right about now. And also, if you're listening on podcasting platforms and you are feeling kind, be sure to leave me a good rating and review. It definitely helps me out. Well, it's been a pretty long time since I've done a show, but I'm back, guys, today. And we're going to talk about some March Madness today, mainly on the show. Obviously, there's been a lot of NFL news that's gone down over the past couple of weeks, as well as NBA news. I will be getting to those topics and those things of that nature over the next month or so. In the next couple of weeks, I've got a lot of catching up to do and whatnot. But today, I'm mainly talking about everything related to March Madness. In today's show, I'll talk about why Tom Izzo is an overrated head coach, if Gonzaga can run the table and win it all this year. Also about some changes that have happened to college basketball over the past couple of years, but also I have a couple of NFL topics to talk about. I will talk about Drew Brees. I will talk about Lamar Jackson. And I'm also going to later talk about Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots. So without further ado, let's get this show underway. But before I do get started, just got one more thing to talk about. You can also follow me on Instagram and Twitter if you want to connect with me on a very personal note. You can follow me on Instagram. My Instagram is GHIMAN_MCKINNEY. And my Twitter account is at GHIMANMCKINNEY. And as far as the Twitter and Instagram account for the actual show, the Juice Alert, where you can get specific updates in regards to this show and things of that nature, you can follow those accounts. The Twitter account is at the Juice Alert, and the Instagram account is the Juice Alert _. Okay, as I talked about earlier, this show is mainly about college basketball, but I'm going to kick the show off by talking about Drew Brees. So obviously we all know that Drew Brees just recently retired from the NFL, and to me, I'm not totally shocked. If you've been watching Drew Brees over the past couple of years, it's pretty clear that his skills had deteriorated a little bit. He's no longer really mobile at all. His arm strength has declined, and he's just not the same quarterback that he once was. The New Orleans Saints really struggled to push the football down the field in their passing game, and that was mainly because Drew Brees no longer was the same quarterback that he once was when he was in his prime, and he ultimately limited their offense. His lack of mobility and his inability to push the football down the field and to fit the ball into tight windows really hurt the Saints offense. So I think that Drew Brees, he didn't have much left in the tank. He really has nothing left to gain as far as his legacy goes. The only thing that really would enhance his legacy is winning another Super Bowl. If he won a second Super Bowl, then that would put him in a class, that he's probably not in right now. But I don't think that Drew Brees is actually capable of leading a team to a Super Bowl. You need a whole lot around Drew Brees at this stage in his career for him to win a Super Bowl, just because he's a physically limited quarterback. He's not what he once used to be. So Drew Brees made the right decision to retire. Now, I want to talk about Drew Brees' legacy and things of that nature, because Drew Brees, to me, he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. I classify him as the savior of New Orleans. He's an absolute legend, one of the most prolific quarterbacks of all time, one of the most efficient quarterbacks of all time, arguably the most accurate quarterback of all time. Drew Brees, he's the real deal. And as far as the quarterbacks in his era, the only quarterbacks I think that played in his era that were better than him were Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, and Aaron Rodgers. And as far as where Drew Brees ranks among all-time great quarterbacks, like people are going to ask me, where does Drew Brees rank all time? I've got Drew Brees right outside the top 5 as far as the greatest quarterbacks of all time. For me right now, the 6 greatest quarterbacks of all time are Tom Brady, Joe Montana, Peyton Manning, John Elway, Aaron Rodgers, and Drew Brees. I went from best to worst, by the way. So, number 1, Tom Brady. Number 2, Joe Montana. Number 3, Peyton Manning. Number 4, John Elway. Number 5, Aaron Rodgers. Number 6, Drew Brees. I have Drew Brees ahead of Brett Favre. I have him ahead of Dan Marino. I have him ahead of Steve Young. You know, Dan Marino was more talented than Drew Brees. So was Brett Favre. But Drew Brees was more precise than Brett Favre. Didn't throw as many interceptions as Brett Favre did. Really put the teams that he had in New Orleans on his back, whereas Brett Favre always had pretty good teams around him, you know. I think that Dan Marino is more talented than Drew Brees, but Drew Brees has the Super Bowl win. Dan Marino does not, so I put Drew Brees over Dan Marino. To me, Steve Young was a good quarterback, but Drew Brees, his longevity is what puts him over Steve Young, and to me, he's just as accurate of a quarterback as a guy like Steve Young. And while Troy Aikman, Roger Staubach, and Terry Bradshaw were able to win multiple Super Bowls, I think Drew Brees as an individual player is a better overall quarterback than those guys. He may not have the arm strength of a Terry Bradshaw, you know, may not be quite as nimble or as mobile as a Roger Staubach, but I'd take Drew Brees over those guys if I were to start a franchise. And I guarantee you, if you put Drew Brees on those Pittsburgh Steelers teams or those Dallas Cowboys teams where he doesn't have to be the focal point of the offense 24/7, where he can hand the football off to great running backs, you know, where he has star wide receivers, a great offensive line, a great coaching staff, an elite defense, where he can at times just game manage his way to Super Bowls, then I think Drew Brees would have more Super Bowl rings than he has right now, okay? Drew Brees for a long time had to carry some very, very bad teams in New Orleans. And I understand that over the past, 4 seasons or so, he's had a great roster around him. So the fact that he was not able to win a second Super Bowl is very disappointing to me, just because he had such a great roster in the later stages of his career. But Drew Brees, he's still a great all-time quarterback to me. And in fact, Drew Brees, like I said earlier, he's the guy that saved the New Orleans Saints franchise, okay? Drew Brees, in his career in New Orleans, played for 15 years, won 62% of his games, had a 142 and 86 win-loss record, so 142 wins, 86 losses. He had 9 playoff wins. He won a Super Bowl. And like I said, before Drew Brees got to New Orleans, the Saints were horrible. They were an awful football team. They were garbage. To put in context how bad the Saints were before Drew Brees got there, the 15 years before Drew Brees got there, they only won 45% of their games. They had 0 playoff wins and 8 losing seasons. He was asked to carry that franchise from day number 1. Okay, he's had to carry a lot of bad defenses. He never played in the cupcake division. Matt Ryan and Cam Newton were in his division for the most part throughout his career, and Cam Newton and Matt Ryan have been to Super Bowl. So he didn't play in the AFC East like Tom Brady. He didn't play in the NFC North like Aaron Rodgers. He always had to play in a very tough division, And I've always said, Drew Brees, he changed the game of football from this perspective. We probably don't hear much about Kyler Murray or Baker Mayfield or Russell Wilson if it wasn't for Drew Brees, because, there's this myth and theory out there that, quarterbacks, they have to be 6'3", 6'4", 6'5", 240 pounds, big, strong arm. You can't win with a short quarterback. But Drew Brees proved all the naysayers wrong. I know Doug Flutie's a short quarterback that has some success in the NFL, but Drew Brees won a Super Bowl, okay? Barely 6-foot tall quarterbacks rarely win Super Bowls, okay? So look, Drew Brees, he was a second-round pick out of Purdue. He didn't have the strongest arm, and a lot of people doubted him. They said, man, is Drew Brees big enough and tall enough to play the position? That's a big reason why he wasn't a first-round pick, But he paved the way for guys like Russell Wilson, Baker Mayfield, and Kyler Murray, because NFL scouts, they said, if Drew Brees can do it, maybe Baker Mayfield can do it. Maybe Russell Wilson can do it. Maybe Kyler Murray can do it. And it really gave those guys an opportunity to really showcase their skill sets, because if it were not for Drew Brees and him being living proof that you can win a Super Bowl and win big with a quarterback that's not 6'5", I don't know if those guys get their opportunities. And let's not forget, Drew Brees was not supposed to have the career that he had. The Los Angeles Chargers, at the time, the San Diego Chargers, they bailed on Drew Brees. People thought that Drew Brees, after the Chargers bailed on him, that he was a bust. The Chargers chose Phillip Rivers over Drew Brees. Meanwhile, what does Drew Brees go on to do? Oh, Drew Brees goes on to go to 13 Pro Bowls. He led the NFL in passing yards 7 times in his career. 4 times he's led the NFL in touchdown passes. 6 times he's led the NFL in completion percentage. He's a 2-time pass rating leader. He's the all-time completion percentage leader. And right now, Drew Brees has over 80,000 passing yards in his career. He's first all-time in career passing yards as I speak today. Tom Brady's probably going to pass him by, but I argue that he's going to probably be first or second in pretty much every major statistical category when it's all said and done for a long, long time. And right now, Drew Brees has 571 career touchdown passes. Okay, he's second all time to Tom Brady. Okay, so when you look at the big picture, Drew Brees is first, second, or third in pretty much all these major categories, and he's put up a lot of great numbers. And I know people don't like to look at stats all the time. I'm not the biggest stats guy, but statistics are representations of what has happened throughout history. And the numbers sometimes don't lie. You know, sometimes they do, but sometimes they don't. And when you put together 15 to 20 years of greatness, I don't think the numbers lie, okay? Now, the biggest knock on Drew Brees throughout his career was that he was never the best quarterback in the NFL at any point. He never won a regular season MVP. To me, that does matter in his evaluation of where he ranks among all-time great quarterbacks. Just because if I'm going to put you in the top 5 all-time, I think you at some point need to have been the best quarterback in the sport. And Drew Brees, he doesn't quite meet that threshold for me. And I do think Drew Brees' numbers have been a product of him playing in a dome for most of his career, of him, getting together with Sean Payton, who's one of the best offensive minds in NFL history. Drew Brees doesn't have the greatest arm. He never was a great outdoor quarterback. And for Drew Brees' career, he's 9-9 in the playoffs. He's a 500 quarterback in the playoffs. And in the playoffs, that's where it matters most. So Drew Brees never was able to capture a second Super Bowl trophy. So that will always be the biggest indictment on his legacy. But Drew Brees, to me, is still an all-time great legend. The other thing I will say is Drew Brees, he didn't make the playoffs all that often. People forget, Drew Brees, he's missed the playoffs 9 times in his career. He's played in 20 seasons. So nearly half of Drew Brees' career was him spent at home watching quarterbacks in the playoffs. Okay, so that's a big reason why I don't have Drew Brees in my top 5 as far as all-time great quarterbacks, just because he was never quite the best quarterback in the sport. He never was able to really carry, bad rosters and bad defenses like a John Elway, like a Aaron Rodgers, like a Peyton Manning. Sometimes you need a lot around Drew Brees for him to win, okay? But Drew Brees is the absolute legend. To me, I don't think you can name any more than about 5, maybe 6 or 7 quarterbacks that are better than him. I have him rated as the 6th best quarterback of all time as I speak today. And Drew Brees is an absolute legend. He will definitely forever be missed. He forever changed the game of football. And Drew Brees, to me, goes down as the savior of New Orleans. Drew Brees had an amazing career, and today he deserves to be celebrated, no doubt about it. Congratulations, Drew Brees, on a great 20-year career. You're a Hall of Famer for sure, no doubt about it. First ballot as well. Okay, folks, I now want to talk about Michigan State's head coach, Tom Izzo, the head coach for Michigan State basketball. I've always said for the past couple of years, and people have agreed with me, and some people have disagreed with me personally. I don't know why people disagree with this take all the time, but to me, Tom Izzo is one of the most overrated coaches in sports history. Not just college basketball history, in sports history, people. Now, don't get me wrong. Overrated does not mean bad. It does not mean that you are a bad head coach, because I'd be foolish to categorize Tom Izzo as a bad head coach. The guy has never had a losing season during his 26-year career coaching at Michigan State. He's developed 11 first-round picks, at Michigan State, which is pretty good. And he's been to the Final Four 8 times as head coach at Michigan State. My biggest problem with Tom Izzo and why I believe he's overrated is because Tom Izzo has only won one national title in 26 years as a head coach. And at a program like Michigan State, that's underachieving. That's unacceptable because it's not like Tom Izzo is not getting great players. No, Tom Izzo's a really good recruiter. Michigan State is, to some people, considered an elite college basketball program. So Tom Izzo is getting 4 and 5 star players to come play for his school. Michigan State is a well-known brand. And more times than not, when it comes to tournament time, they disappoint. And here's a fun fact about Tom Izzo. 10 times Michigan State has been ranked in the top 5 in the AP poll in the preseason. Now, AP polls and preseason rankings are everything, but that just goes to show you that Michigan State, for the most part throughout Tom Izzo's career, they've had high expectations for a lot of those years, okay? And Tom Izzo's only won one national title, and I keep hearing people put him in the category with Roy Williams and Coach K, and even Jay Wright, who's won 2 national titles at Villanova. I mean, I beg the question, who's getting more talent to come to their school? Jay Wright at Villanova or Tom Izzo at Michigan State? I'm going to lean toward Tom Izzo at Michigan State just because Michigan State is a much more well-known brand. Okay, and I'm sorry, but when you're coaching at a place like Michigan State, you're expected to win national titles. And Tom Izzo hasn't won a national title in over 20 years, people. And people keep saying, oh, Tom Izzo, he's just an elite head coach. He's an elite head coach. No, he's not. He's not. He's not an elite head coach. He's just not. Okay? And even when Tom Izzo's team usually gets to the Final Four, more times than not, they get blown out. And a lot of times, Tom Izzo's teams sort of fall apart down the stretch. And I attribute that to Tom Izzo being a very emotional guy that yells a lot. He's filled with a lot of energy, and sometimes he gets emotionally drained, and that wears off on his players. Sometimes I see Tom Izzo near the bench, screaming and yelling, being emotional, and I'm just like, whoa, Tom Izzo, tone it down a little bit, I think at times Tom Izzo gets a little bit too emotional, and usually your basketball team or whatever team you're coaching takes on the personality of your coach. And Tom Izzo, when things are riding high, he's really, really emotional and really happy. And sometimes he's a little bit calm. But when things start to go wrong, he's all emotional. He gets out of hand. And sometimes he unravels just like his team unravels when it matters most of the time. So look, I'm sorry, people. Once again this year, Tom Izzo, his team didn't even make the NCAA tournament this year. Okay, they lost to UCLA in the first of 4. Okay, this year in 2021. UCLA is an average team at best, people. Michigan State had high expectations. A lot of people considered them a top 10 team all year. Okay, well, at the start of the year, I should say. Not all year, because we saw throughout the year Michigan State get exposed. But, I wasn't surprised that Tom Izzo and Michigan State unraveled and they lost to UCLA just because this has been happening for years and years. Michigan State has these high expectations. People prod Tom Izzo up and they say he's an elite head coach. He's a tier 1 head coach. No, he's not. Tom Izzo's a really good head coach, well above average, but he's not elite. He's only been elite for maybe a couple of seasons. A couple of years ago, you maybe could have made the argument that Tom Izzo is an elite head coach. But as time has went on, I'm sorry, but if you go nearly 2 decades without winning a national title at a school like Michigan State, where you're getting 4 and 5 star players, that's not good enough, in my opinion. And really, it should be in a lot of other people's opinions. I don't know why people, push back on this topic, but the harsh reality is, whether people want to admit it or not, Tom Izzo is an overrated coach. And he's not just one of the most overrated coaches in all college basketball right now. He's one of the most overrated coaches in all sports history. Okay? No doubt about it in my mind. He's one of the most overrated coaches in sports history. Tom Izzo for you right there. So I now want to shift to Kentucky basketball. The UK Wildcats missed the NCAA tournament this year in 2021. They finished the season with a 9-16 record. And I get it. At Kentucky, Coach John Calipari is dealing with a lot of young players year in and year out. A lot of one and dones go through Kentucky. So pretty much every single year, it's a whole new different group. So I understand they get to constantly, preach a different message to a different group of players. But the bottom line is that John Calipari, during his 12 years at Kentucky, he is massively underachieved, okay? And so here's the thing. When John Calipari took the job to coach at the University of Kentucky, what I hope he realized he was getting himself into was this. When you take a job at the University of Kentucky, you're going to be measured on your Final Four appearances and how many national titles you win. And I'm sorry, people, but at Kentucky, one national title in 12 years is not going to cut it for most of the fan base. At least for me, it doesn't. I'm not a Kentucky basketball fan, but if I was, I would feel disappointed in John Calipari and what he's accomplished at Kentucky. Sure, Kentucky's been in the mix for a couple of years. Sure, they've been a relevant team, but now they came and make the NCAA tournament, and they have one national title win in 12 years. That's not good enough, okay? And a couple of years ago, I remember Kentucky was, 38-0. In 2015, they were 38-0. And John Calipari and the Kentucky Wildcats could not win the national title. They were the best team by far. It wasn't close. They were 38-0. 38 wins, 0 losses, heading into the Final Four, and they lost. They couldn't beat Wisconsin. And like I said, it'd be one thing if John Calipari was not getting star players, but that's far from the truth. John Calipari has had the privilege of coaching guys like Devin Booker, DeMarcus Cousins, John Wall, Karl Anthony Towns, De'Aaron Fox, Jamal Murray. These are high-level NBA players, people. These are all-star level players. At times, John Calipari's Kentucky Wildcats have been by far the most talented team in the country, and some years it wasn't even close, and yet, with all that talent, John Calipari has only won one national title in 12 years. That's unacceptable, okay? I think John Calipari is kind of overrated a little bit. I don't think he's as overrated as Tom Izzo just because I think people recognize Calipari's good, but not great. Meanwhile, people say that Tom Izzo's elite when he's not. But the bottom line is I think that John Calipari is definitely underachieved at Kentucky. And heading into next year, I put John Calipari on the hot seat because, listen, I don't care how many new players you have to bring in. Going 9-16 at Kentucky is massively disappointing, okay, in any year. So, John Calipari, to me, is underachieved at Kentucky. He should be on the hot seat heading into 2022 or 2021, as I should say, because next year we're going to have the 2021 season and it bleeds into 2022. You get the point, but either way, I think John Calipari is underachieved at Kentucky. No doubt about it. One national title in 12 years is not good enough at a place in Kentucky where you're getting NBA caliber players year in and year out to come play for you. It's not good enough. John Calipari must step up his game, no doubt about it, as a head coach. So, obviously March Madness is getting underway. And, it's funny. This is the first time since 1976 that Duke, Kentucky, and Louisville are not going to be in the NCAA tournament. Long ago, well, even 10 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago, college basketball was all about the blue bloods and the elite programs. It was Kentucky, it was Duke, it was North Carolina, it was Kansas, it was Louisville, it was Michigan State, and everyone else. Today, guys, in the NCAA tournament in 2021, none of those quote-unquote elite college basketball programs are even a top 2 seed in the NCAA tournament. None of those schools, Kentucky, Duke, North Carolina, Kansas, Louisville, Michigan State, none of those schools are a top 2 seed in the 2021 NCAA tournament. In fact, in the NCAA tournament this year, Illinois, Michigan, Gonzaga, Baylor, they hold the 1 seeds. And the 2 seeds are Ohio State, Houston, Iowa, and Alabama. Folks, Michigan, Ohio State, Iowa, and Alabama, they're known for their football programs, not college basketball programs, and they're out there overtaking these teams this year, okay? And I think that there's been a shift in college basketball and changes, whether we want to admit it or not. And I like the change because I think that power is slowly but surely shifting to the Ohio States of the world, the Iowas of the world, the Alabamas of the world, the Oklahoma States of the world, the Gonzagas of the world, okay? And a big reason why is because over the past, 5 to 6 seasons, there's been a shift in recruiting. Let's take a look at some of the recruiting rankings and whatnot. Well, I'll just tell you about them, okay? In 2020, the top 7 recruits, out of all those recruits, only one of those recruits chose what I would call an elite college basketball program. That guy was Brandon Boston. He chose Kentucky. You look at Cade Cunningham. He chose Oklahoma State. Jalen Green. He chose to go pro. Evan Mobley. He went to USC. Zaire Williams goes to Stanford. Scotty Burns. He goes to Florida State. All these guys are going to lower tier level schools or just going pro. You know what I'm saying? Another recruit chose to go pro. Brandon Boston, of course, like I said, he goes to Kentucky. And Zaire Williams and Scotty Burns, they chose Stanford and Florida State. Folks, there's a shift now in college basketball recruiting because 5 years ago, you look at in 2015, 3 of the top 5 recruits chose to go to elite college basketball programs. One kid chose Kentucky, another kid chose Duke, another kid chose Kansas, and obviously Ben Simmons and Jaylen Brown, they chose LSU and Cal. But the point I'm trying to make is 5 years ago, you would get, every 5 recruits, roughly 3 of them would be choosing, North Carolina, Michigan State, Kentucky, Duke. Now, you get maybe 1 out of every 5 kids choosing those schools, You got the Cade Cunninghams of the world going to Oklahoma State, and all these other guys going to lower tier level schools. And I think that what these kids are realizing is you don't need to go to Duke, UNC, or Kentucky to win national titles. And if you want to just strictly develop and get better as a player, maybe going to Alabama, LSU, or Oklahoma State is better for you. Because, look, here's the thing. At Kentucky, at North Carolina, at Duke, you get NBA players that come from those schools, no doubt about it. But the harsh reality is the Roy Williams of the world, the John Caliparis of the world, the Coach K's of the world, they're being paid to win national titles. If they don't win national titles, they're going to get fired. So, look, they're going to try to develop the players to a certain degree, but I'm sorry, they can only develop players so much without trying to actually focus on winning, okay? And when you look at some of the best players that actually win, that are in the NBA right now, LeBron James didn't go to college. Kevin Durant went to Texas. That's not a powerhouse school. Steph Curry went to Davidson. Kawhi Leonard went to San Diego State. James Harden went to Arizona State. Damian Lillard went to Weber State, people. Klay Thompson went to a school in Washington, people. I think he went to Washington State, not even the regular school, Washington, okay? The point I'm trying to make is the Oklahoma States of the world, the LSUs of the world, the Alabamas of the world, those coaches are getting paid to win as well, but the end-all, be-all for those schools are national titles. So that allows the James Hardens, the Damian Lillards, the Kevin Durants, the Steph Currys of the world to develop their skill sets and get better, actually, It's a great spot for them. And I like the fact that college basketball is now shifting towards sort of the lower tier level schools, starting to really dominate the sport. I like the fact that, you have Duke, you have North Carolina, you have Kentucky. Those teams are great, and it's great when those teams are great as well. You always root for North Carolina. You always root for Duke. You always root for, the Kentuckys of the world because they're big-time brands. And when the big brands are winning, everyone's winning. But you occasionally want to see the Iowas, the Purdues, the Illinois, the Ohio States of the world. You occasionally want college basketball to expand and not just be all about the blue bloods at the top. It's always great when there's some suspense, when there's new storylines. And I like the fact that college basketball is sort of shifting towards, not all the blue bloods and elite programs just dominating the sport. I think college basketball is definitely changing before our eyes, and I'm actually all for the change for all the reasons I mentioned. I now want to shift to Gonzaga. So Gonzaga is 26-0 entering the 2021 NCAA tournament. They're a huge favorite, and they've had a great year, no doubt about it. Mark Few, to me, is a really good head coach. Jalen Suggs is arguably their best player. He's probably going to be a lottery pick. And Gonzaga is looking to be the first team since 1976 to run the table and win it all. And what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is be an undefeated national champion. But folks, I am here to tell you right now today that Gonzaga, for one, will not win it all this year. But I'm also here to tell you why Gonzaga will not be winning national titles anytime soon. Let's start with this year in 2021. Do you know how hard it is to go undefeated for an entire season? Folks, there's a reason this has not happened since 1976. Folks, we're in 2021 currently. That was decades ago that a team ran the table and won it all in the regular season. Upsets in March Madness happen all the time. Gonzaga is bound to have at least one bad night. They're bound to maybe have a night where they're playing good, but the opposing team is hotter and plays better, and they outplay them, okay? It's bound to happen. And there's a lot of good teams in this tournament. Iowa's good. Illinois is really good. Baylor's loaded. Michigan's loaded. Even teams like Alabama and LSU that are known as football schools, they're really good this year. Not all those teams are in, Gonzaga's bracket. But the point I'm trying to make is, don't act like this is going to be a pushover for Gonzaga and that they're going to just cakewalk their way to the Final Four or the national championship. And by the way, back in 2015, the Kentucky Wildcats were 38-0 heading into the Final Four, and what happened? They lost, okay? And that team had Karl Anthony Towns and Devin Booker on it, two of the top 20 players in the world. I'm sorry, but that Kentucky team was much more talented and much more athletic and much more better and more dominant than this Gonzaga team. And I'm sorry, Jalen Suggs, you're a good player, but you're not Devin Booker. You're not Karl Anthony Towns. At least you haven't proven to be up to this point, okay? And here's the biggest reason why I never buy into Gonzaga year in and year out as a true national title contender. The biggest reason is because Gonzaga, for the most part, plays in a conference that builds them up as a huge front runner, people. Gonzaga does not play in the ACC, where there are 8 to 10 good teams every single year. The ACC is still the best conference in all college basketball. Gonzaga does not play in the Big Ten, where this year there are about 7 to 8 good teams, okay? Gonzaga plays in the West Coast Conference. The best team in that conference is BYU, who's an above average team. But I'm sorry, outside of BYU, you're playing Pacific, you're playing Santa Clara, you're playing St. Mary's, you're playing San Francisco and Portland and San Diego. Look, not trying to dog these programs too much, but I'm sorry, when you're playing against teams like San Francisco, Portland, San Diego, and Pacific and Santa Clara in your conference year in and year out, that does not build you up and get you prepared for the big dogs like North Carolina, like Duke, like Kentucky. I know those teams are not in the tournament this year, minus North Carolina, but the point I'm trying to make is Gonzaga doesn't get tested all that often. They're playing a bunch of cupcakes. They're playing against a bunch of teams that have no business trying to compete with them. Gonzaga is 5 to 10 times better than all the teams in their conference. What does that mean? They build up these wins in the regular season, and then when it comes postseason time, when they see the big boys, they fall under pressure. I know Gonzaga beat Kansas this year. They beat Baylor this year. They beat Iowa this year. They beat West Virginia. They beat Virginia. I get it. But I gotta see it to believe it in tournament time. Until Gonzaga proves to me they can go through the big dogs in the NCAA tournament, I'm not picking them to win it all. And this year, they're doomed and bound to at least have one bad game. Or a game where a team outperforms them. So I'm sorry, people. I'm not buying into the Gonzaga Kool-Aid and the Gonzaga hype. Gonzaga, to me, has always been a front runner. They will always be a front runner to me until proven otherwise in the NCAA tournament when it matters most. I don't believe in Gonzaga, and they will not be winning national titles at any point going forward anytime soon. So I now want to talk about Mike Krzyzewski and the Duke Blue Devils. So Duke basketball, for the first time in 26 years, is not going to be playing in the NCAA tournament. It's pretty crazy. You know, it's been a weird year, you know, where Kentucky has missed the tournament. Louisville's missed the tournament. Even, you know, when you talk about other sports, I mean, Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots, they missed the playoffs this past year, which is really unheard of, despite them losing Tom Brady, okay? And look, here's the thing, people. We should not diminish what Coach Mike Krzyzewski, a.k.a. Coach K, we'll call him Coach K throughout the rest of the segment. We should not diminish what Coach K has been able to do at the University of Duke just because of one bad year. Coach K, to me, is the greatest head coach in college basketball history, not named John Wooden. I can't put him over John Wooden just because John Wooden, at one point, he won 88 consecutive games as a head coach at the college basketball level. He's won 10 national titles compared to Coach K's 5 national titles. And to me, John Wooden's teams were much more dominant in a shorter period of time. People forget Coach K, he's been coaching for over 40 years at the collegiate level. That's not to take anything away from Coach K. Because like I said, Coach K, to me, is the greatest college basketball coach of all time, not named John Wooden. That's some very high praise right there. And when it comes to Coach K's legacy at the University of Duke, he's coached 41 years at Duke, and only twice has he had a losing season. That's pretty astonishing stuff, people. His teams have been to 12 Final Fours. He's won 5 national titles, and he's won over 76% of his games. He's also currently the all-time leader in career wins as a college basketball coach with 1,170 wins. The next closest is 1,081 wins. So even the gap is wide between him and the next guy up, okay? So look, we should not condemn Coach K and the Duke Blue Devils for having a weird year and a bad season during a COVID year. This is the year of COVID. COVID has affected Bill Belichick. It's affected John Calipari. It's affected Louisville's head coach. COVID-19 has affected a lot of different coaches, not just Coach K. That even just goes to show you how hard it is to win when guys like Coach K and Bill Belichick are out here having disappointing seasons during the year of COVID. It's an adjustment, a lot of Zoom meetings, not your normal off season. Okay, so look, the bottom line is Coach K and the Duke Blue Devils, they'll be back next year. They'll be competing at a high level very, very soon. And ultimately, we have to realize that we're witnessing history and ultimate greatness when it comes to Coach K, because I don't think anyone's ever going to duplicate Coach K's success at the University of Duke. Ever. It's never going to be duplicated, okay? It just isn't. I will bet my money that no one's probably going to coach 41 years in college basketball. That's probably not going to happen just because we're in a microwave society, and the minute you have a bad season, unless you're, an established guy, you're going to get fired more times than not if you're not established, because we're in a microwave society where we think everything's a quick fix. So I doubt anyone is going to really coach as long as Coach K has coached, and I doubt anyone is going to pass him on the all-time wins list as far as college basketball wins, because he's got over 1,000 wins for his career. 5 national titles to go along with it. And based on the way college basketball is shifting, like I talked about earlier, where the Oklahoma States of the world, the Iowas of the world, the Purdue's of the world, places like that, they're relevant now. So you're not just getting North Carolina, Michigan State, and Kentucky dominating 24/7. There are a bunch of good teams now. So the point I'm trying to make is appreciate Coach K while he's here. He's a phenomenal coach, and what he has done at Duke will more times than not probably never be duplicated in history. Let's talk about the Michigan Wolverines. So the Michigan Wolverines have made it into the 2021 NCAA tournament. They are a part of March Madness. They are one of 4 number 1 seeds. You got Illinois, you got Gonzaga, you got Baylor, and you got the Michigan Wolverines. And Michigan has had a great year this year. And a big reason why is because of Juwan Howard, who's in his 2nd season as Michigan head coach. He's done a phenomenal job this year. He seems to be a great motivator, a great recruiter. Players seem to respect the guy. He seems like a player's head coach. Seems fun to be around. And Juwan Howard knows the game of basketball, because a lot of people forget he was a part of the Fab Five several decades ago at Michigan, and they changed college basketball forever. So he's played at the collegiate level. He's played at a high level before, so he knows the game of basketball, no doubt about it. And look, Michigan this year, really at this point going forward, under Coach Juwan Howard, Michigan has a chance to put themselves on the map as an elite college basketball program. Why do I say that? Well, for one, I don't think Juwan Howard is going anywhere anytime soon. The guy is 48 years old. He's only scratching the surface as head coach of Michigan. And let's say Michigan wins it all this year, or they maybe make a deep run in the NCAA tournament. That's going to be huge for them, because then players that are in high school, that are looking to go to different places for college as far as, where they want to play college basketball, they're going to look at Ohio State. They're going to look at Michigan State. They're going to look at Iowa. They're going to look at Purdue. They're going to say, Michigan's making these big-time runs. They're out there winning the national titles. They're making it to Final Fours and Elite Eight. I might want to go there. And with the way Michigan State is kind of falling off a little bit, I think Michigan's on the upward trend, And there's already been a huge shift in college basketball, like I said earlier, just because we no longer see North Carolina dominating at a high level. Kentucky and Duke did not even make the NCAA tournament in 2021. So it's wide open for the Oklahoma States, the Gonzagas, the West Virginias, the Alabamas of the world to put their stamp on the college basketball map. So Michigan, to me, has a great chance to put themselves on the map as an elite college basketball program. I think that Michigan right now is a really good tier 2 program with a national title under Juwan Howard's belt and maybe some deep postseason runs. Michigan really could put themselves on the map as an elite program. Now, as far as if Michigan is going to win it all this year, is it possible? Yes, but is it going to happen? Maybe, maybe not. We'll see. They will have to make up for Isaiah Livers, who's going to be out for at least the first couple of games in the NCAA tournament. So we'll see what he does when he comes back, if Michigan advances. But I really like the direction that Michigan is going as a program under Juwan Howard, and that's how I feel about Michigan. They definitely could put themselves on the map as an elite program, okay? No doubt about it. So, I want to now talk about Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens. I've been seeing a lot of wide receivers get signed during this free agency period, and none of them have gone to the Baltimore Ravens. And it's pretty clear to me over the past 2 seasons that Lamar Jackson's a dynamic quarterback. He's amazing. He's won league MVP. He's won over 80% of his games. I believe he's definitely, at the very least, a top 10 quarterback. He's a special runner of the football at the quarterback position. He led the league in touchdown passes a couple of years ago, so he's shown the ability to beat you throwing the football as well as running the football. Lamar Jackson is dynamic, and John Harbaugh, he's a great head coach. Baltimore seems to have a great defense. But over the past 3 seasons, Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens have not been good enough to win a Super Bowl. And a big reason why is because the Baltimore Ravens have failed to put great weapons by Lamar Jackson's side at the wide receiver position. Look, I like Marquise Hollywood-Brown. I like Willie Snead. But these guys are not true number 1 wide receivers. Meanwhile, you've got Aaron Rodgers. He's got Devontae Adams. Kyler Murray has DeAndre Hopkins. Baker Mayfield has great wide receivers. Tom Brady has wide receivers for days. Same thing with Patrick Mahomes. Josh Allen got Stephon Diggs this year. He had a career year. It's time for the Baltimore Ravens to give Lamar Jackson a legitimate number 1 wide receiver. Now, we've already seen, Will Fuller and AJ Green get signed in free agency. So there's not a whole lot of options out there outside of Kenny Galladay, who's going to cost you a ton of money. Look, if I'm Baltimore, I'm throwing the bag at Kenny Galladay, no doubt about it. Kenny Galladay, to me, is a number 1 wide receiver. He would definitely help solve the Baltimore Ravens' issues at wide receiver. And look, Lamar Jackson's a great quarterback, but it's very clear to me he needs a number 1 wide receiver by his side. That's true for 95% of the quarterbacks out there, okay? Most quarterbacks cannot win a Super Bowl without great wide receiver play, or at least multiple great targets. That is why I believe the Baltimore Ravens should do everything in their power to trade for Julio Jones. The Baltimore Ravens' first-round pick is a late first-round pick. So, look, the bottom line is whoever they draft more than likely is probably not going to be good enough to start for them right away just because it's a late first-round pick. And, well, by the time you get past pick 15 of the NFL draft, most of the elite players are probably gone. Sure, you have your undrafted guys, your Jims in the 3rd and 4th round and things of that nature. But as far as the guys that are getting the most hype, they're gone by pick 22, 23, 24, 27. That's the range the Baltimore Ravens are picking in. Meanwhile, the Atlanta Falcons, they're in rebuild mode. They need all the draft picks they can get. And meanwhile, they've got a star wide receiver named Calvin Ridley, who's not Julio Jones, but he can develop into a number 1 wide receiver one day. Some argue he's already a number 1 wide receiver. And look, if I'm Atlanta, I'm hesitant to move on from Julio Jones, but I also recognize that I think my team has peaked. And I need to start rebuilding. So I'm willing to put Julio Jones on the trading block. And if I'm Baltimore, I'm willing to throw multiple picks at the Atlanta Falcons to go get Julio Jones. Julio Jones, when healthy, might arguably still to this day be the best wide receiver in all football. I get Tyreek Hill is dynamic. I get DeAndre Hopkins is dynamic. I get Devontae Adams is dynamic. But that guy Julio Jones, he's the real deal when healthy. So, look, I think Julio Jones still has a lot left in the tank. He still has about 3 to 4, maybe 5 good to great years left in him. He still has something left in the tank, in my opinion. And I believe if Julio Jones gets added to the Baltimore Ravens, they start to become serious Super Bowl contenders. The Baltimore Ravens, to me, over the past couple of years, have been a good playoff team. But they haven't quite been on New England or Kansas City or Tampa Bay or Green Bay or San Francisco's level just because they're not dynamic enough at wide receiver. Julio Jones will be a great pass-catching option for Lamar Jackson. He'd be a 1,000-yard receiver, no doubt about it, if he stays healthy. He's also big and physical enough to block in the run game. You know, the Baltimore Ravens ask their wide receivers to run block a lot because, well, they're a run-first offense, okay? So you need to be able to run block in that offense. And when Julio Jones is on the field, he's going to be able to elevate Marquise Hollywood Brown and Willie Snead and Mark Andrews because you have to pay so much attention to Julio Jones that those guys are going to get open. I love Mark Andrews a lot more as a number 2 option as far as pass catchers, okay? I know he's a tight end, but he's kind of the number 1 option on the Baltimore Ravens offense. As far as Marquise Hollywood Brown and Willie Snead and Devin Duvernay, I like those guys a lot as complementary pieces. I don't like them as number 1s, but complementary pieces, yep, sign me up. So, I think if Baltimore is serious about competing for Super Bowls and about getting Lamar Jackson the help he needs, they will go out and trade for a guy like Julio Jones. They will sign a guy like Kenny Golladay. I just think that they need to go all out and try to get Julio Jones. I know Atlanta probably is going to be stubborn as far as them neglecting to trade Julio Jones, but guys, there's a sucker born every day. I guarantee you, if the Baltimore Ravens throw enough good assets at Atlanta, they'll at least have to think about trading away Julio Jones, no matter how good he is. Because whether Atlanta wants to admit it or not, they know for a fact they're not winning a Super Bowl this year or the next 2 to 3 seasons. They're rebuilding. So if you're the Baltimore Ravens, this offseason, you must focus on getting Lamar Jackson a number 1 wide receiver, and why not start out by getting Julio Jones to be that guy for Lamar Jackson. Julio Jones is one of the 5 most talented wide receivers of all time to me. He's excellent. He's great. He's a great guy. He's great for your locker room. He's dynamic when healthy on the field, and he'd be an A-plus addition to the Baltimore Ravens roster, and he could be the piece that puts Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens over the top. Baltimore would enter the Super Bowl conversation legitimately if they add a guy like Julio Jones or Kenny Golladay or just, quite frankly, the number 1 wide receiver to their roster. Go try to trade for Julio Jones, Baltimore Ravens. It's the right move to do, and it would definitely help out Lamar Jackson if you can get that deal done. No doubt about it. Okay, so like I said, I talked about how Julio Jones would be the perfect fit for the Baltimore Ravens offense. And I feel that Baltimore should trade for Julio Jones to give Lamar Jackson a number 1 wide receiver. Now I want to talk about the New England Patriots, who have actually been very, very active in free agency. They've added to their defense. They most notably have added to their offense. They signed, I believe, Kendrick Bourne at wide receiver. They signed Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry at tight end. They made some really good moves. And I do think that New England's wide receiver core is a little bit better than people give it credit for. You know, you got Damiere Byrd, who showed a lot of flashes last year as a young player. Julian Edelman, to me, is still a capable wide receiver that can give you that can get open and create separation when he's healthy. But when I look at the Patriots offense overall, they made some good signings. They've improved their tight end core. But I still don't see a true number one wide receiver on their roster. And to me, that still is sort of a problem when you're in a division with the Buffalo Bills, the Miami Dolphins, and the improving New York Jets. Not to mention, you have to compete with Kansas City. You got to compete with Baltimore, Pittsburgh, Cleveland. The Chargers are looking pretty good. I think they're an underrated team. There's a lot of good teams in the AFC. The Colts, led by Carson Wentz now, the Tennessee Titans. The Patriots, they very well could be a playoff team, but they very well could not be a playoff team. But see, here's the thing. Like I said, I think the Patriots need to add a number one wide receiver to their team to help out Cam Newton. Because at this stage in Cam Newton's career, he's still a good quarterback to me, but he's not quite what he once was. He is nowhere near 2015 MVP level Cam Newton. Cam Newton, to me, needs a lot around him to go out there and win a Super Bowl. And ultimately, I think the Patriots will be best served to find a number one wide receiver to add to their roster, because right now, they don't have one. They don't have a DeAndre Hopkins. They don't have a Devontae Adams. They don't have a guy that they can just say, hey, this is our best weapon. We can match him up on Tre'Davious White. We can match him up on Jalen Ramsey, and he can go win. They still don't have that guy at the wide receiver position. That is why I believe the New England Patriots should trade for Odell Beckham Jr. Now, if you're the New England Patriots, you could look to find that number one wide receiver in the draft with the 15th overall pick, but why would you wait for the NFL draft? And why would you bank on a rookie wide receiver to come in day number one and be that guy? Bill Belichick does not have a great history of drafting wide receivers. A lot of people thought that N'Keal Harry was going to be very good. N'Keal Harry, up to this point, he's been a big-time disappointment. And Bill Belichick put his name to N'Keal Harry. So, if I'm the Patriots, I'm looking for an established guy with some speed that can take a top off of defense, that can get open consistently, and that when I match him up with Jalen Ramsey or Tre'Davious White, he can win. And that guy to me is Odell Beckham Jr. And I do believe that Cleveland would be willing to trade away Odell Beckham Jr. just because Cleveland's biggest need is not wide receiver. They need help on defense. They need a couple more draft picks to help improve that secondary and that linebacker core. They got plenty of weapons. They got Jarvis Landry. They got Donovan Peoples-Jones. They got 3 really good tight ends. They have a lot of great weapons at wide receiver and tight end already. And not to mention, I think Baker Mayfield actually plays his best football at times when Odell Beckham Jr. is not in the lineup. For whatever reason, I just don't think Odell Beckham Jr. and Baker Mayfield clicked the way I think they should have clicked when Cleveland initially made that trade. I thought that, Baker Mayfield, Odell Beckham Jr., that's gonna be one of the best wide receiver and quarterback tandems in the entire NFL. Hasn't worked out that way. So I think that Cleveland could solve their issues by getting an extra draft pick or two from this trade if New England were to trade for Odell Beckham Jr. And Odell Beckham Jr. would go to a team that will be able to utilize his skill set. Josh McDaniels and Bill Belichick will find very creative ways to utilize Odell Beckham Jr. And Cam Newton would definitely be best served by the Patriots adding Odell Beckham Jr. just because I don't think the Patriots have a lot of great weapons for Cam Newton right now. This to me makes way too much sense. The Patriots need to go all in and try to help Cam Newton and try to complete this offense. They've made a lot of good moves in free agency so far, but I think that this move would ultimately put the icing on the cake, and this will solidify New England as a very formidable playoff team and potentially a dark horse Super Bowl candidate because they have a solid offensive line. They have a decent run game. They've got a top 10 defense to me. And Bill Belichick, to me, is still one of the best head coaches, if not the best head coach in all football. Odell Beckham Jr. to the New England Patriots makes way too much sense. I guarantee you the Cleveland Browns would be willing to trade him away. You can give the Cleveland Browns that number 15 overall pick. They can use it on a defensive back or two, and they can get rolling. I think it would be great for both sides. If I'm the Cleveland Browns, I would put Odell Beckham Jr. on the trading block because I guarantee you teams like the Ravens, teams like Washington, and teams like the New England Patriots or the Green Bay Packers maybe, but we'll stick to the Patriots now. Teams like the Patriots would be more than willing to spend some draft capital and maybe give you a good player or two to get Odell Beckham Jr. Because when Odell Beckham Jr. is healthy and on the field, he's a top 10 wide receiver in the NFL, no doubt about it. That's how I feel about Odell Beckham Jr. He's great, and he'd be a great fit for the New England Patriots. And by the way, my last final point about Odell Beckham Jr. is stop saying he's a diva. Okay? Not very many teammates have spoken out about Odell Beckham Jr. being a diva. The narrative around there that Odell Beckham Jr. is a diva is a falsely blown narrative by people in the media that don't like the way Odell Beckham Jr. dresses. They don't like the way he carries himself. Okay? He's not a cancer. He's not a diva. He would fit the New England Patriots locker room. They said the same thing about Cam Newton, and Bill Belichick has done nothing but praise Cam Newton since day number one. In fact, Bill Belichick praised Cam Newton so much and was so fond of him, he gave Cam Newton a second contract despite Cam Newton not having a great season overall last year. So that's how I feel about Odell Beckham Jr. He'd be a great fit for the Patriots, and he potentially could allow the New England Patriots to really make some noise in the AFC. The Patriots, they have one of the worst wide receiver cores in the entire NFL. That unit can get much, much better with Odell Beckham Jr. being added to their team, no doubt about it. So, I now want to shift to Drew Brees and the New Orleans Saints once again. This will be my final NFL topic of the day. You know, like I said earlier, Drew Brees is an absolute legend. To me, he's one of the 5 to 7 greatest quarterbacks of all time. The guy's been to 13 Pro Bowls. He's led the NFL in passing yards 7 times. 4 times, he led the NFL in touchdown passes. 6 times, he's led the NFL in completion percentage. 2 times in passer rating. Right now, he's the all-time leader in completion percentage as far as all-time quarterbacks in history. And he's thrown for over 80,000 passing yards, and he has 571 career touchdown passes. His numbers are amazing and off the charts, and his accomplishments are off the charts as well. Now, here's the thing. The biggest knock on Drew Brees, like I said earlier, was he was never quite the best quarterback in the NFL in his era. I've always had him behind Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, and Aaron Rodgers, so he never quite was the best quarterback in all of football. He never won a league MVP. I do think to a certain degree his numbers have been a little bit of a product of playing in a dome with a great offensive-minded head coach in Sean Payton. You know, Drew Brees doesn't have the greatest arm. He doesn't at times perform his best when he plays outdoors. And in the playoffs, Drew Brees is 8-8 for his career. And he's also, he's 9-9, pardon me. Drew Brees in his career is 9-9 in the playoffs in his career. 9 wins, 9 losses. It's a 500 record. That's kind of average, you know. In fact, it's the epitome of average. It's 500. That's average, okay, to me. And Drew Brees has missed the playoffs 9 times in his career. And those are some of the biggest knocks against Drew Brees. But really what ultimately I'm saying is Drew Brees only has won 1 Super Bowl throughout his entire career. So I want to answer the question, is Drew Brees only winning 1 Super Bowl a disappointment? And I say no, it's not a disappointment. Drew Brees not winning a second Super Bowl to me is not a disappointment. I will tell you why. The biggest reason why is because Drew Brees wasn't even supposed to be this good in the first place. He was not supposed to have this Hall of Fame career. Now, granted, it's God willing, but when you look at the way Drew Brees' career started and where he was drafted, if you would have told someone 20 years ago, Drew Brees is going to be one of the let's just say a top 10 quarterback of all time, because anyone that thinks Drew Brees is not a top 10 quarterback of all time, they're delusional and they don't know what they're talking about. Some people have Drew Brees in the top 5. I don't quite have him in the top 5. Let's just say Drew Brees hypothetically is at worst one of the 10 best quarterbacks of all time. If you would have told someone 25 years ago that Drew Brees was going to end up as one of the 10 greatest quarterbacks of all time, they probably would have laughed at you, because Drew Brees, he was a late second round pick out of Purdue, a basketball school. And he goes to the Chargers, has a little bit of success, but ultimately gets injured and doesn't perform all that well down the stretch, throughout his Chargers career. The Chargers end up replacing Drew Brees with Fil A. He goes to New Orleans, where at the time, New Orleans was an absolute dumpster fire. They were no good franchise. They were a laughingstock. And Drew Brees was asked to be the quarterback to turn that franchise around. And he did it. He ultimately was able to accomplish that feat. That's a big-time accomplishment in itself. And when you look at Drew Brees' height and his weight, and you compare him to some of the other quarterbacks, you compare him to the Terry Bradshaws of the world, the Dan Marinos of the world, the Ben Roethlisbergers of the world, the Aaron Rodgers of the world, the Tom Bradys of the world, the Peyton Mannings of the world. These guys are 6'2", 6'3", 6'4", 6'5", roughly 220 to 240 pounds. They're big boys, okay? Or they have big-time arms, like Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers is, I would say, a normal-sized NFL quarterback, but that guy's got a big juiced-up arm, no doubt about it, okay? Drew Brees, he's barely 6 foot tall. Some would say he has a slightly above-average arm. He's not the most mobile guy. He was not a first-round pick. But yet, Drew Brees overcame the odds. And he overcame a city and franchise that was lost and needed him to pick them up. Okay? The Saints, like I said before, Drew Brees got there, they were awful. So, to answer the question, is Drew Brees not winning a second Super Bowl disappointment? No, because I don't quite put Drew Brees in the category with Tom Brady, with Joe Montana, with Peyton Manning, with Aaron Rodgers, because I know he has physical limitations. I know he missed the playoffs 9 times in his career. I don't put that burden on him. See, if Aaron Rodgers finishes his career with only 1 Super Bowl, that's a disappointment, because when I look at Aaron Rodgers, I think Aaron Rodgers is arguably the most talented quarterback of all time. He has physical gifts that Drew Brees doesn't have. He has a stronger arm than Drew Brees. He's faster than Drew Brees. He's more mobile than Drew Brees. He can make throws that Drew Brees can only dream of making, even in practice, people. Okay? Drew Brees, we have to realize what he is. And we have to realize what people thought he was going to become. And we have to realize that Drew Brees is an overachiever and a guy that overcame his obstacles. That's what I think about when it comes to Drew Brees. So no, Drew Brees not winning a second Super Bowl is not a disappointment, okay? It's disappointing in the fact that, sure, the Saints built a good team around him in the latter part of his career, and he was not able to capitalize, but I don't put that as a huge crime against Drew Brees, just because, like I said, he was never supposed to be this great in the first place. He overcame his obstacles and things of that nature, okay? So, look, I do think that if Drew Brees was given better defenses early in his career and a little bit more consistent of a team, and maybe if he didn't have to play in such a tough division, he might have had more postseason success. But ultimately, it is what it is. He's 9-9 in the playoffs. I never considered Drew Brees to be an all-time great playoff quarterback. I just don't see him as that guy. He doesn't strike me as a guy like Tom Brady or Joe Montana. Guys that, when it matters most under pressure, they elevate. Drew Brees at times has shown he can elevate under pressure, but more times than not, he stays the same, or at times, he doesn't quite live up to expectations. But, I mean, Drew Brees, he's had a heck of a career. And football's a team sport. That's what people forget. We tend to categorize the quarterback as the entire team. The quarterback is not the entire team. He's one of a 53-man roster. So, no, Drew Brees, him not winning a second Super Bowl, to me, it's not a disappointment for all the reasons that I mentioned. Drew Brees is a legend, and his career has been everything other than disappointment. It's been a huge success, no doubt about it. And I want to talk about Roy Williams and the North Carolina Tar Heels. So the North Carolina Tar Heels are in the NCAA tournament once again. Roy Williams, what he's done in North Carolina is pretty unprecedented. He's been in North Carolina for an 18-year period. And during those 18 years, Roy Williams has led the North Carolina Tar Heels to 16 NCAA tournament appearances. He's won 3 national titles. He's only had 1 losing season, and he's won over 75% of his games. And keep in mind, Roy Williams actually back at Kansas during a 15-year stretch won 80% of his games at Kansas. So Roy Williams is a well-proven head coach at the college level. Now, what is Roy Williams' legacy? To me, Roy Williams, his legacy right now is being the second best coach of his era. I think that Mike Krzyzewski is the best head coach of Roy Williams' era. But I put Roy Williams second behind Coach K. You know, Coach K, he's had a little more sustained success, has more national titles, has more career wins, has been doing it for a longer period of time. That's saying a lot because Roy Williams has done it for a really, really long time at a high level. I think that Roy Williams is actually one of the 5 greatest college basketball coaches of all time. I mean, he's won 903 games in his career up to this point, and we're still counting because I think Roy Williams is going to coach for at least another 4 to 5 years, okay? Only 12 head coaches in history have reached 900 career wins at the college basketball levels. That's unprecedented right there. And what has allowed Roy Williams to have success at North Carolina? What makes Roy Williams and the North Carolina Tar Heels an elite program? Roy Williams, to me, is a guy that gets the absolute most out of his players. See, when it comes to Roy Williams, he's sort of stuck in the middle of schools like Kentucky and Duke because while North Carolina is a big-time brand, I think Duke, as of right now, is a slightly larger brand, just based off recent history, okay? And I do think that Kentucky, you know, is a little bit more attracting to certain players because it's a place where a lot of NBA players that are going to go one and done, that's where they choose to reside, okay? Because Kentucky is known as the place where one and dones go. Well, Roy Williams, you know, his job is much more challenging than people realize because while he's a big-time figure, he's not as famous as Coach K, considering the fact that Coach K coaches for Team USA, the Olympic team, okay? And whether you want to admit it or not, that's a big draw to a high school student, or I should say a high school player, because they're thinking to themselves, Roy Williams is a really good coach, but Coach K has coached guys like LeBron James, Kevin Durant, Damian Lillard, Kyrie Irving. I might want to go play for him. And meanwhile, you got Kentucky, the place where one and dones go. Roy Williams had to deal with the challenges of, you know, coaching at UNC. And while UNC is a big-time brand, while they do get 4-star players and 5-star players from time to time, you have to realize UNC is a very, very prestigious academic school. Only 23% of students that apply can actually get into North Carolina. And whether you want to admit it or not, Roy Williams has to recruit these players based on their academics and their grades first. Because if you can't get into the school, well, what's the point of recruiting you? Okay, so Roy Williams, to me, gets the most out of his 2-stars and 3-star players, and he'll get the most out of 4- and 5-star players as well. And like I said, he doesn't quite get the 5 stars that Kentucky gets because of Duke's brand. He's at a slight disadvantage. But he finds guys that are willing to buy in, and he develops those players. And it seems like Roy Williams is able to really relate to his players as well. The way he's able to plug in different types of players year in and year out and win playing different styles of basketball, to me, is really fascinating. 1 minute UNC is a defensive-minded team. 1 minute they're all about their size and athleticism, and 1 minute they're shooting threes. So the way that Roy Williams over the years has been able to adapt and really shift the focus on the types of players that he's bringing in. That's the most impressive thing about him. Roy Williams, to me, is no doubt about it a Hall of Fame level coach. He's an elite head coach today, and outside of Coach K, a.k.a. Mike Krzyzewski, I can't name a better head coach of his era outside of Roy Williams. The era of Coach K, where we're in the 2000s and the early 1990s, So that's how I feel about Roy Williams. He's a class personified guy, and he's a great coach, no doubt about it. So, a couple more topics to talk about today, then we'll end the show. When it comes to sleeper teams in the 2021 NCAA tournament, there's a lot of good picks out there, and there's even some good teams out there that should be favored to win it all. You look at the big-time schools that are in the tournament this year. You look at Baylor, Iowa, Ohio State, Illinois, Alabama, LSU, Gonzaga. A lot of good teams in this tournament. However, my sleeper team this year, the team that I believe is flying under the radar, is Oklahoma State. Why do I say Oklahoma State? I say Oklahoma State because I believe in Cade Cunningham. Folks, Cade Cunningham, he very well could be the number one pick in the 2021 NBA draft, depending on who, is picking at that slot, And he'd be a great addition to the Timberwolves or the Pistons or whatever team drafts him because he's really good. He's only 19 years old, but he's 6'8", about 220 pounds. He's a 20-point per game scorer on average, shoots about 40% for three. He's a solid passer, and his team feeds off his energy. He can do it all, man. Cade Cunningham is a player to watch during the 2021 NCAA tournament. He's excellent, man. He very well could be the first overall pick. At least right now, today, if I'm choosing players, he'd be my number one overall pick. He's really, really good. I mean, you look at Oklahoma State as a team. They've beaten some good teams this year. They've beaten Texas Tech. They've beaten West Virginia multiple times. They've beaten Kansas. They've beaten Texas. They've beaten Oklahoma. And a lot of people out there are probably going to be sleeping on Oklahoma State because they're not a number one seed. They're not a 2 seed. They're not even a 3 seed. They are a 4 seed. And they're supposed to be a football school. I'm here to tell you, Oklahoma State this year, they have a really good underrated team. And I believe Cade Cunningham could really steal the show in the NCAA tournament like Carmelo Anthony did a couple of years ago when Syracuse was able to win a national title, like Steph Curry did when he led Davis into the Elite Eight. I know Cade Cunningham's only a freshman, but he's a dynamic freshman at that, and I won't be shocked if he starts to really take over this tournament. So, look, I believe Oklahoma State is better than people give them credit for, and they're my team to watch, and they're my sleeper team in the 2021 NCAA tournament. Keep your eye out on Cade Cunningham and Oklahoma State during the 2021 NCAA tournament, no doubt about it. Okay, so when it comes to Florida State, I now consider them a basketball school. A couple of years ago, I considered Florida State to be a football school, and there was about an 8-year stretch under Jimbo Fisher from 2010 to 2017 where they won a lot of games. In fact, they won a national title in 2013. But ever since Jimbo Fisher left the Florida State Seminoles program, they've been an absolute mess. And this past year, they were the 13th best team in the ACC. And the ACC is not very good. Outside of Clemson, there's a lot of average to below average teams. I mean, when you talk about Florida State, Pittsburgh is better today. Boston College today is better. Even Wake Forest today is a better team than Florida State. That's pretty sad. Florida State football has really fallen from the graces. Ever since Jimbo Fisher was the head coach, you've had guys like Willie Taggart come in and not know what the heck they're doing. Florida State at times has been a clown show in regards to their football program. But today, Florida State's basketball program, I think it's one of the most underrated programs in the country. I really do. Florida State basketball has had 15 straight winning seasons. The last time they had a losing season was during the 2004-2005 season. And that's in the ACC, people, the best conference in all college basketball. The ACC has annually 7 to 10 really good to elite teams every single year. And over the last few years, when I look at Florida State, I've said to myself, they're well coached, they've got size, they've got length, they've got shooters, and they're a well above average program. If I'm a recruit right now and I'm looking at some of the under the radar programs, why not go to Florida State? You know, they're a really good program. I like their head coach. And I like the direction Florida State as a program is heading in. They're a team that could make some noise in the NCAA tournament. Florida State always seems to be a team that puts up a respectable fight during the tournament. They're probably not going to go to the Final Four, may not go to the Elite Eight, even though it's possible. But when it comes to Florida State, they're going to compete. They're going to put a good product out there. And when it comes to the Florida State University football program, that's no longer the thing that represents the school. To me right now, Florida State is a basketball school, not a football school. And that's mainly due to Florida State as a football program imploding and Florida State as a basketball program being very consistent over the past 10 to 15 years. They're a team that you should look out for in the NCAA tournament. Well, folks, that's pretty much all I have today. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode today. Have a God bless day, and I'm Ghost. Thank you so much for watching this video today. Please also note that the Juiciest Sports Podcast is not just a YouTube channel. It is available on all podcasting platforms, including Spotify, Google Podcasts, iTunes, and Apple Podcasts. Also, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share this content with all your friends. This podcast is my favorite thing in the entire world right now. It is my passion. And I want more people to listen to this podcast. I really want this podcast to grow. Also, a fun fact about me is that I want to go into the sports broadcasting and media world once I graduate from the University of Toledo, a college in Northern Ohio. I am looking to become one of the next great sports broadcasters and analysts out in the world. And I potentially would like to start my own network if this podcast really truly grows. Or if I fall short of that goal, I would love to work for a big time network like ESPN or Fox Sports 1. I am open to all networks. So if you believe in my dreams and you see or hear my passion through the screen, be sure to tell all your friends about the Juiciest Sports Podcast. Stay motivated, you guys. Have a God bless day, and I'm out.